Today I'm going to give you some information about a musician named Berlioz. Now when you hear me say the name Berlioz, you might think I mean a little guy who looks something like this. Now he is a good musician, pretty fine piano player, but he's not who we're talking about today. We're going to talk about another Berlioz. This Berlioz, his name was Hector Berlioz, and he was born in France in 1803, and he looked like this. Can you see him? Yeah, there's a glare there, but there he is. That's a painting. So we don't know if that's really what he looked like, at least at this age. I got a picture of him right here, and that's an actual photograph. And so we can be pretty sure that that's what he looked like. That's Hector Berlioz, and he was born in France, near Grenoble, in 1803. And I think I got all those facts right. Now, unlike a lot of famous composers or musicians, Berlioz did not come from a musical family. His father was a doctor, and he expected that when Berlioz grew up, he would become a doctor as well. And so after he graduated from high school and when he turned 18, Berlioz's father sent him to Paris to study medicine. Well, when he got there, he experienced things that he had never seen before. You got to remember that this was a way different time. They didn't have things like the internet or television or movies. So if you wanted to experience something, you had to experience it directly. You couldn't go to see a movie that somebody in a different city could see. You had to go see a play that could only be performed where you were right then, with the people who were performing it. You couldn't listen to a record on your record player or listen to a song on your iPhone because they didn't have those things. And so if you wanted to hear a particular musician or a particular song, you would go have to see them perform live. If you wanted to hear Beethoven, you had to go hear Beethoven. You couldn't just go buy a Beethoven CD. So when Berlioz first went to the Paris Opera House to see an opera, it was the first time that he'd ever seen anything like that before. And it really changed his life. Berlioz wanted to know how those composers had made the music sound the way that they had made it sound. He knew that in Paris there was a place, just like people went to Paris to study medicine, they also went to Paris to study music. And he knew that there in Paris was the Paris Conservatory, where he could go and he could look at the music that different composers had written, and he could learn more about it. And so he went to the Paris Conservatory and he looked up the music that he had seen, and he started copying it so that he could take it home and study it on his own. Now, not everybody liked that. The people at the conservatory didn't like it because they thought that only the people who actually went to school there should be able to go into the conservatory and copy down the music. And his dad didn't like it because his dad wanted him to focus on his medicine study so that he could become a doctor as well. Unfortunately for his dad, Berlioz had decided that he wanted to become a composer. So he dropped out of medical school, much to the chagrin of his father, and enrolled in the Paris Conservatory, where he wrote and studied music. Now his first few attempts at writing music weren't very successful. He wrote a few pieces and he rehearsed them, but he never performed them. Also during this time, he really got excited about winning a contest called the Prix de Rome. Now the Prix de Rome was a contest where composers would send music in to Rome and people would judge it, and if they had the best piece of music, then they would win a prize. And it was a money prize, and so he felt like if he could make some money, it would free him up to write more music. And all of his hard work began to pay off in 1830. Now, 1830 was a big year for Berlioz because, number one, he finally won the Prix de Rome. And also, number two, he wrote one of his most famous pieces of music called the Symphonie Fantastique. And it was really the first successful piece of music that he had written. And that's the year that he became a famous musician, was 1830. And for the next decade of his life, he wrote some of his most well-known and most loved music. Now, another thing that he did, and what he was most famous for during his own lifetime, was he also was a conductor. Now, the reason he became a conductor was because he was unsatisfied with the way other conductors would present his music. He felt like his music was different from what they were used to performing, and so he felt like he could do a better job of conducting than the conductors who were trying to do it for his music. Berlioz enjoyed his greatest success as a composer during the 10 years following the composition of the Symphonie Fantastique and his winning of the Prix de Rome. During this time, he conducted many performances of his own and other composers' works, and he became one of the most famous musicians in all of France. After this time period, though, he had a lot of difficulty getting the people around France to still listen to his music. As happens with a lot of different composers and a lot of different musicians, after some time their music starts to fall out of fashion, and that happened to Berlioz. But he was still very popular as a conductor and performer in France and in different countries around the world. And so for the last part of his life, mainly what he did was he would travel around to different countries like Russia and Germany and England, and he would conduct performances of both his own music and other people's music for audiences to hear. As he got older, this strenuous lifestyle of travel and performance began to take its toll on Berlioz. And after a tour of Russia, he went to the Mediterranean to rest and recuperate, but he slipped and fell on some rocks and he ended up getting paralyzed. And so he moved back to his family home in Grenoble, and about a year later, that's when he died in 1869. And so he lived to be 66 years old, and he's one of the most famous composers ever, and so we all want to take a moment to remember Berlioz. What was his first name? Hector Berlioz.